Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 2. I recorded this video the first time. It was 38 minutes long. That was a little bit too long in my opinion, so I'm gonna go through the content a little bit quicker, a little bit more concise, and try to keep it around the 30-minute mark. So I'm gonna get right into it and not rant too much. So, sharing screen, my nifty little thing here. First thing that we're going to do is a self-time audit. And you're probably asking, what is a self-time audit? So this is going to be an exercise I want you to do for the next 5 weeks. Pick one day of the week. And if, let's say you're using tomorrow, Monday as an example, then you're going to write down how you spend your time throughout that entire day. And so the easiest way to do this is every 2 or 3 hours on your cell phone, just jot down, hey, I did this in the morning, I did my yoga, I did my stretching, then I started doing my exercises, and just keep track of what you did throughout the day until you have the whole day complete. Once you've done that, then you would repeat the following Monday, and the following Monday, we're gonna do it for the next 5 weeks. And the objective is to become more aware of how we're spending our time. So that's gonna be the first exercise for this week. Keystone habits. So you might be asking, what is a keystone habit? So a keystone habit is something that triggers a bigger habit. So for example, if you want to go to the gym in the morning or after work, one of the best things to do is to pack your gym bag the day before or before you go to work. This way, you know that when you get home or you wake up in the morning, is that bag is ready, it's packed, and you're off your way to the gym. If we have something that blocks us from going to do the bigger habit, like going to the gym is a bigger process, how can we have something little and small that's gonna trigger that change that we want? Another keystone habit to think about is if your goal is to eat healthier, it's about doing the prep shopping necessary. So let's say you go and do your prep shopping on Sunday night, then it's about you get all the healthy food on Sunday, and that way you're more likely to eat healthy for the rest of the week, because you bought the right food and you have it in your fridge. So when you go to your fridge, it's there. So those are examples of keystone habits. A keystone habit is something that triggers bigger habits to happen. Todd Herman from Peak Athlete calls these actually trigger habits. And it's meant to be something smaller that's gonna have a much greater impact on us. It's almost like a domino effect of one small habit leading to bigger and better changes for ourselves. So, what is the first keystone habit you want to develop that's going to have a positive impact on the goal that you're trying to achieve? We're going to get to that. There's a couple of Steve Jobs quotes in this presentation. The first one is, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots will somehow connect in your future. And this is fucking bullshit when it comes to goal setting. I get the quote, and it's really meant to be more on a higher level where you don't know how everything's gonna happen and connect going forward from like a philosophical standpoint, because life is serendipitous and things happen miraculously. But when we're going after our goals and our projects, we need to know the finish line. The finish line is essential for us, because if we don't have that end goal in mind, that target that we're seeking out, it's really hard for us to get there. And so it's not about connecting the dots backwards, it's about knowing where the finish line is and moving towards that. There's a book called The One Thing, and there's a principle in it, it's the One Thing principle, and I can basically summarize it to you very quickly so you don't have to read the whole book. The one thing is, what one thing can you be doing right now that's going to get you to the goal you want to complete someday? For most of you, you should have outlined your goal right now that you're working on. So it's going to be the question of, what is the one thing that I can do right now to get to the goal that I have someday? And the exercise is really, that's valuable in the book, is about bringing it back to the present moment. And so here is the exercise. This is one of the best exercises I've come across about how to connect your goal off in the far distant future into the present day. In the book, The One Thing, they talk about living with priority and purpose. They say when you're connected to your purpose and you give that priority, it gives you energy, momentum, and you are lit up to pursue your goals. So the idea is, let's say I have a someday goal, and let's say my someday goal is going to be like, I want to publish a New York Times best-selling book. Well, the odds are that on my first shot, it's not going to happen. I'm probably going to write many drafts of novels and maybe publish 2 or 3 before that would happen. So the exercise works like this. So if that's my someday goal, I want to publish a New York Times best-selling book. What's the one thing I want to do someday? The book. Now, based on that someday goal, what is one thing I need to do in the next 5 years? So let's say that I want to draft up 10 books in the next 5 years, because I know not all of them are going to get published, and my first 7 might be shit, and the next 3 will get published, and the third one will become a New York Times bestseller. So if I have to write 10 drafts in the next 5 years, what's the one thing I have to do next year in order to achieve my 5-year goal? So for me, it would be to draft up 2 books, because if I want to write 10 in 5 years, then I need to do 2 a year. Now, based on my 1-year goal, what's the one thing I have to do this month? So if I have to write 2 books in a year, I break that down. That means I have to write about 1/5 of a book this month. Then based on my 1-month goal, what's the one thing I have to do to make this a weekly goal? And so I would bring that back. Okay, I'm going to have to write, let's say, 25 pages this week. And then based on that goal, what's the one thing I would have to do today? Then I'd have to write 5 pages. And then based on that 1-day goal, what do I have to do right now? And that would be, I have to start writing my 5 pages today, right now in this moment. And so that's how the one thing works. And it's really meant to simplify this big, audacious goal that you have and bringing it back to the moment. So this is not an exercise that I recommend for you to do, but you can do it if you feel it's going to help you. But the reality is we should have already broken down our goals through this. And this is just another way of clarifying how important it is to know where the finish line is and bringing it back to the present moment. We're rolling. I feel like we're on a much better tempo than the last one. So here's a great example of the one thing, and this is a visual illustration that is similar to the one in the book. And basically, look at the first domino. What is the one thing you can do today that's going to have an impact on you to reach your 1-day goal, and that's going to be your 1-week goal, and then your 1 month, 1 year, 5-year, and then it builds up. And so that your someday goal of becoming a New York Times bestselling author, which is a bigger goal, can be achieved. And that way, all the pieces are linking together. And that's the most important thing, is linking the pieces together. Now, this isn't a concept that just pops up once in a while. This is a reoccurring theme in all the goal-setting productivity that I've studied. So Brian Tracy, who has a book called Eat That Frog, and you guys might have heard of it, his metaphor is it's about executing 1 oil barrel at a time. And one of his quotes is, one of the best ways to overcome procrastination is to take your mind off the giant task and to focus on the single task in front of you. So if we keep using the New York Times bestselling example, that's a giant task that can be daunting. And like, how do you get there? There's so much that has to happen for that to become a reality. And so it's about breaking it down to one single task in front of you. And so the way he visually illustrates this is, if you had to cross a desert that was 500 miles wide and long, and there was no visible landmarks, there's no curvatures in the horizon, how would you cross it without getting lost? And this is an actual real life example that occurred to him. He was in the Sahara Desert, and there's a stretch of desert, I forget the exact name of it, it's in the notes actually, but it's really, you know, how do you get across this barren landscape without getting lost? There's no water, there's no food, and potentially being in a place where you can starve yourself. And so what the French did, because they would travel through this desert back and forth for trade, is they put up oil barrels every 5 kilometers. Now, I couldn't find a picture that had the oil barrels, but Brian Tracy talks about when you're crossing this desert and you're driving across it, at all times you can only see 2 oil barrels, because that's basically the distance of the horizon. Behind you, there would be 1 oil barrel, and in front of you, there'd be another. And so this is metaphorical for the fact that in order for us to achieve our goals, we need to know what oil barrel we're crossing, and which one we're going to. And it's very similar to the one thing where we have to connect our far off goal to the present moment. And so the way they were able to cross the desert is by going 5 kilometers at a time from one oil barrel to another, and eventually they made it across the 500 miles. And so that is how we have to look at our goals, especially if they're big goals that are not short-term projects, but rather long-term, bigger things. Like for me, one day I wanted to, have $1 million income. It's like, how do I make that a big goal for myself? At the same time, this course launch just got me $500. Like there's a huge gap there. So it's like, it's huge work for me ahead. And it's really about focusing on the present moment and what I have to do right now and keeping those oil barrels connected in order to be able to achieve my goal of making $1 million through online courses one day. So there's one other guy I want to bring up, and his name is John Lee Dumas. He runs a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. He interviews an entrepreneur every single day and releases a podcast every single day. And he just released this book called The Freedom Journal, and it had massive success for him. And I looked at it, I bought it, I really wanted to see what was so amazing about it. And it's the exact same principle. So you can't read the text, but basically in this photo, where the first line is the first arrow, it says, in 98 days, I will have done X. And the Freedom Journal is based on the principle of in 100 days, you can achieve any goal. And he basically counts you down from 100 all the way down to this is the goal I'm going to achieve. So you can see how he's using that 100-day mark to connect you to a goal based on what you're doing today. And then the second line is my number one focus today is, it's the one thing again, it's the one thing reoccurring here. It's the one thing reoccurring here where we're really focusing on, this is my number one focus today. The next line is, to get closer to my goal today, I will do these 3 things. And so it's really, again, about connecting those oil barrels. It's like, what 3 things am I doing to connect myself to my one-day goal of being a New York Times bestselling author, or for me, making $1 million off course launches? It's how do I stay focused on that goal? And then by the end of today, I will have accomplished these things. And again, you're writing them down. You may notice that some of these are in my worksheets that I've created. And the idea is to really keep you focused in the moment on what you need to do to connect yourself to the goals that you've deconstructed through DISC. Because what we've done is we've taken projects and we've started at the finish line, and now we reverse engineering them. And we're looking at, okay, based on how we deconstructed them, what do I have to do today to get to that goal? But the key thing here is it's that visual map of how we're getting there. We see the pieces that we need. We have our oil barrels. We know what our someday goal is. And because we have that map, our mind is already subconsciously processing how we can get there. And that's the key thing, is we're connecting those dots. We're not connecting them backwards like Steve said. Well, we are, because we're reverse engineering it. But we're doing it going forward. We know what that finish line is. So what is the reoccurring pattern between all these people? Well, like you see, it is the oil barrels, it is the one thing, and it is the Freedom Journal of, it's about doing your highest leverage things and have the biggest impact, connecting your goals today to the future. And it's really about being focused on that, knowing that what you do today is critical towards what is going to happen for you in the future. So going back to one of the first slides, what is the keystone habit that you want to develop? The one that's going to have the biggest domino effect on your life. And that is, the next exercise is start planning the last 10 minutes of your session. You should be planning your next work session. And so the reason we want to do this, and let me repeat it, so the last 10 minutes of every work session, you're planning the next work session. So what we're doing is we're connecting those oil barrels. We know exactly what we have to work on. We have our goal, we do our work session, and then once we're done that work session, we figure out what do we have to do, because we have momentum, we have energy, we're in it, we know what we need to get done next. And so instead of just stopping right there, we decide the next 3 things based on what we need to do to achieve our far off goal. And because we've already broken it down with this, it should be pretty easy to keep connecting the dots and really making sure that we're aligned with our far off goal. And that's what we really want to be focusing on. So whenever, and this should happen for you, like this is a habit that I want you to ingrain. And when I say habit, it's not just like one of the things I would love for you to take away from this course is the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes of your work sessions, plan your next work session. And now when you sit down to it, you know exactly what it is you have to do. That's the exercise. I just explained it. So that's the second exercise for this module. So some of you have what I would consider projects, and others of you have visions. So like Leanne and Emma, you guys are working on projects because your projects are less than 90 days. Preston, you're building a video game. So that is more of a vision because yeah, you're working on your demo and that would be a project, but it's gonna take you 2 years to build your video games. That's more of a vision. It's a pretty big goal. Now, the reason why I break this down is projects are typically less than 90 days and a vision is more than 90 days. And the reason being, it's just our perception of how close that reward is. When we feel the reward is closer, we're more motivated to achieve it. And when it's further off, it's harder for us to perceive it. So what do I mean by that? Temporal discounting bias. You guys are probably like, what the fuck is temporal discounting bias? So biases are hardwired in our head. There is many of them. I'd say there's about 70, 75 biases that we've identified in psychology. And basically they're just ways that the brain operates and perceives the world that we don't necessarily are aware of. And so temporal discounting bias it's a distance bias. And so it's a tendency to give greater value to the rewards in the near future versus the far off future. So if I were to use me as an example again, if I want to have $1 million off my course launches one day, that is a great goal. But how motivated am I to achieve that goal today? To be honest, not that motivated because it seems so daunting and impossible. But my goal that is very exciting and motivating for me is to do $3,000 off the first 2 launches of this course. So this first launch got me $500 or a little bit over that. And then the next launch, I'm gonna aim for $2,500. And that's gonna be at the start of January. And I'm gonna increase the price of the course, but that $3,000 lights me up. Now it shouldn't light me, like you would think that $1 million would light me up even more. The problem with $1 million is that it's so far off in the future. My brain has a hard time thinking about, well, Philip, how are you realistically gonna make $1 million off course launches when you're aiming at $3,000 right now? And so that disconnect is the temporal discount bias. That reward, even though it's bigger and much more meaningful, is so far off in the future that it's really hard for me to grasp my head around it. While the near reward of $3,000 is much more meaningful and impactful on me right now. And so that's a big reason why people fail at their goals, is because they create these big goals and they're so far off and distant in the future, and there's no connection to the present. You don't feel it. You don't think it's possible. And if you don't feel like you can achieve the goal, then you don't get any excitement, you don't get energy. And this goes back to the first slides where I said our goals should excite us. You know, they basically, they should be specific, they should be believable, and then this equals excitement. And that's the key thing, is we want to get excited about our goals. So the way to get excited about them is to make sure they're connected to the near future, under 90 days, because that's a project we can handle. If it's over 90 days, that's a vision, and there becomes a disconnect between what you're doing. So Preston, for you, it's so key to focus on getting that demo out, and the game will come. It's gonna be, there's so many little projects for the full game to come out, and it's gonna be a long-term play for you, because a video game is a 2-year project, as you said. Little wins are critical. This is a key component of the course, and that's exactly what I was just talking about. We need to have little wins in the present moment, in the day-to-day, in the week-to-week, in the month-to-month, in order to feel like we're getting closer to our goal. If we're not, then it becomes this vision of something we're disconnected from, and we're not making progress towards it. Focus on little wins. Little wins are critical. Do not underestimate them. The fact that you guys are in this course, there's 5 of you, and I've made money off it, not a ton. Do not underestimate how much I value that. That is a key little win for me that I'm giving so much value and praise and gratitude to. Now, we're going to be moving on to time blocking. We've talked a little bit about this, where you have your frequency, how frequently you're going to be working on your goals or projects. And now when we get into time blocking, we're going to make sure that we have our calendar defendable in the court of law. So the rules. Basically, if I asked you to show me your calendar, you can show me the time slots where you're working. For me, it's 7 to 11, Monday through Friday in the morning. That time works for you. I want you to figure out your time slots. So they're blocked in. You know exactly when they're happening. They're happening at the same time. That's how we develop pattern. There's a pattern and we can fall into a groove. They're clearly scheduled, so you know exactly when they're happening for you. There's no negotiating it. There's no moving it around. It's firm in your calendar, and that is something you commit to. And that is your locked and designated time for your goals. And you go into those sessions prepared. So whenever I sit down for anything, I bring in water and I'm prepared for them. We're actually going to get into how you should be fully prepared for your work sessions in the next slide. One thing I do want to point out, if you decide to bump a work session, something comes up that is so critical that you can't change, that session doesn't get deleted from your calendar. It gets moved to another part of your calendar. If you say you need 12 hours a week for your goal or whatever time you can afford, you have to find that 12 hours every single week. The only way you're going to make progress on your goal is to make sure that you defend those time blocks in your calendar and that nothing else oversees it or bumps it. So there's this one quote from the One Thing that I really like. Time blocking is about giving disproportionate amount of time to the thing that is going to make a difference in your job. For us, it's a difference in our goals and our habits. That's why we're giving the time and leverage to time blocking. And that's by Gary Keller, the author of The One Thing. When we sit down for our time blocking sessions, I want you to come optimize to work. So what does the O stand for? Everything is off. Your internet off, your phone is in airplane mode. We're gonna minimize the distractions. We actually wanna get them down to 0 if we can, and make sure that we're fully engaged into what we're doing. Even when we're working, we don't have Facebook open, we're not checking our emails. We're just focusing on the task that we've identified for ourselves that's moving us closer to our project that we're trying to achieve. Provisions. So like I mentioned previously, I bring in water, but bring in food, bring in snacks, whatever you need in order to be able to sit for that 4-hour time period. You don't want to get up. If you get up, you're distracting yourselves from what you're doing, and it's not efficient. We're going to be talking about deep work in the next module, and you'll see how much of an impact that has on your brain residual productivity from a neuroscience standpoint. Tell others. Right now, as I'm recording this, I have a sign on the glass door saying, look, do not come in. I do not want to be interrupted. It's really about engaging the people around you. Some of you don't have people, like you live on your own or your kids are off during the day to school, so you'll have time that's free where you don't have to worry about that. But if you want to succeed at this, if you're doing work late at night and your partner or spouse might need something from you, then just tell them, like, look, I've slotted off these 3 hours to do this, and I can't have any interruptions because I need to work on my goals. And again, we'll talk about the value of having uninterrupted time about these slots in the next module. And I do want to say, your spouse should be supportive of this. Most people will be very engaged and they'll understand if you present to them why this is so critical and important to you. People want you to win and succeed, and so they're going to be for this. And it's just learning about how to communicate what you expect of the people around you. What do we choose to work on? I'm going to up the tempo a little bit because I don't know where we're standing right now. It feels like we're going a little bit long. So this is one of the feedback that I got again and again from people as I was developing this course. They didn't know what goals to work on. They didn't know what to choose. So how do we know? This is a very critical thing of, like, when we sit down for these time block sessions, how do we really know what we need to work on? How do we know what to focus on? So most of us, too much time or too much to do and too little time. So how do we combat this? So there's a few principles, again, that come reoccurring in goal setting and productivity that really help you to identify what it is that you should be working on at the start of your sessions, so you're being as efficient with your time as possible. So Brian Tracy calls this eating your frog. And so there's a book called Eat That Frog. And basically, the quote that I like from it is, complete your most difficult task first. If you have 2 frogs to eat the ugliest one first. And a frog is a metaphor for the thing that's going to be the biggest, most uncomfortable, hardest thing for you to do. And what he's saying is, when you sit down in the morning to go to work, or when you start your productivity sessions, is to do your most challenging task first. If you can eat that frog, that's going to have the biggest impact on you. And because you've conquered the biggest, hardest thing, it gives you momentum and it allows other things to follow after that. And like he says, if you have 2 frogs, always eat the other one first. Start by doing the most difficult thing right off the bat. And so often we just jump onto some easy, mundane tasks that aren't going to have an impact on what we really need to do. In the one thing, there is a focusing question. So I should say question, not questions. And so the focusing question is meant to help you identify what it is you should be doing at the start of your work sessions to really challenge and tackle that biggest thing. And the question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And so that's the question you want to be asking yourself. What can I do so that everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And you're, again, looking for a task that's going to have the biggest leverage and impact on you. Because when you start using this lens, you're looking for something that is going to give you achievement and progress, but it's going to be a simple task, 1 or 2 things that's going to have the most amount of leverage. Very similar to DISC and the 80-20 principle. So doing the most important thing is always the most important thing, Gary Keller. And that's why I prefer DISC, because it's lens of what 20% of my actions will give me 80% of the result. All these principles, eating that frog, what's the one thing that I can do that will make everything easier or unnecessary, and DISC is about looking at that's going to have the greatest value and impact for you and doing that to move towards your goals. So the second reoccurring pattern that we're picking up and noticing with all these productivity and personal development experts or goal experts is that, one, we're eating that frog. We have the focusing question, what's going to make everything easier and unnecessary. And then Tim Ferriss' DISC. And basically, all these talk about doing your highest priority task that's going to give you the most amount of leverage towards completing your goal. And that's what we want to be focusing on. When you start those sessions and when you're planning your next session, what's the next thing that you can do that's going to have the biggest impact on you to achieve your goal? And keep tackling the biggest obstacles, tasks, and that's really what's going to help you get significant progress towards achieving your goals. Not all tasks are equal. And that's what we're really getting into here, is that when we focus on the highest priority tasks, those tasks are going to give us the biggest amount of progress towards our goal. So when we see that finish line, that's how we're getting there quicker and faster than before, as opposed to just doing things that keep us busy. And so that's the first thing. Being busy is not necessarily a good sign. I can go to the optometrist, pick up my glasses. I can go drop off a letter. I can pay my credit card bills. I can do all these things, but that's not getting me anywhere closer to making $1 million off course launches. So being busy, doing things around life is not getting you towards the goal you want to achieve. And that's why we time block specific sessions where we're working just on our goals and not being busy with other things. If those oil barrels aren't connected, the busyness is not productive for you. So don't play the checkoff game. It's not about checking off all these random tasks. People love creating lists of different things they need to get done and then checking it off. That is not, again, moving you to the finish line of where you want to go. And that's why we're going extreme. We're really asking ourselves, what are the things we have to do to achieve our goal, and really focusing in on that, as opposed to just doing random things. We've deconstructed our project and our goal, and we're focusing on only the actions that are moving us towards that. Everything else is unnecessary. We're saying no to it. We're saying, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing this. You might be asking, like, but Philip, I need to be able to go run these errands. We're going to get to that next module. I'm going to teach you where you can put all these silly little tasks And I shouldn't use the word silly because they are necessary for us to live and function. But there's a way to stack them and bulk them together and really create a separate time slot for that. And we'll be talking about that more in the next module. But for this one, it's really about focusing on the goals that you have to achieve your bigger end goal at the finish line. And that's the key thing. So we have to say no to a lot of the little things. And so on that note, I want to wrap up with another Steve Jobs quote. And this is one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes. People think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. He's saying you have to pick carefully. I'm actually as proud of the things we haven't done as I've done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And that is exactly it for you. If you want to succeed with your goals, it's about saying no to 100 other things around you. It's not about taking on every single thing. It's about having your finish line in sight and then creating the micro projects that you need to get there, the oil barrels that connect you to that finish line. So that way what you're doing in your day-to-day time block sessions is having a direct impact to where you want to go. So there's 3 exercises for this module. So the first one is doing a time audit, and I've explained them all in the modules. I'm going to go over them really quickly. Do a time audit, so pick either tomorrow or one day this week, and you're going to write down how you spent the entire day. Use your cell phone really quickly to do that, and do it for the next 5 weeks, and use the same day again and again, where basically it's a typical day for you, whether it be a Monday or a Wednesday. That is the day that you're going to keep track of to see how your time's being spent. The objective is to become more aware of how you're spending your time. Time block your work sessions, and I want you to go into those sessions opt. So really know, like, you have your frequency, you decide how many times a week you're working on your goals, and now go in there opt. Everything's off, you're prepared with provisions, and then you're telling other people to make sure you're not getting interrupted. And then start your keystone habit. So at the end of your work sessions, plan the next 2 or 3 things that you have to get done in the following session. And that way you're connecting the dots. You know what your far off goals in the future with your finish line, but your next session you're already planning, and you're laying the pillars down as they did in the one thing. How do you connect your someday goal to the present moment using the one thing? And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're connecting what we have to do in our next work session to our far off goal. Leanne asked for resources. So here are the 5 books that I use, a couple internet sources. Todd Herman is somebody we're going to be talking about more in future modules, so I threw him in there. You guys will definitely get to know him. And the one thing I want to show you is I have added in some notes. So I've shared with you guys the slides. And so down here, you can see I have notes on some of the slides. And so that way there's no notes here, but most of them do, right? So if you want to go back to the slides, if something about how I said it was unclear or not succinct, you have access to the PowerPoint for Module 2, and you will going forward with all of them. I can even share Module 1 as well. And that way you can go through the notes, and if there's anything else you want to see, it's in there. So thank you so much for coming to Module 2. I am hoping this one was under 38 minutes. I try to be more succinct and concise with my words. And if you have any questions, definitely send me an email or a message, and I look forward to speaking with all of you on Thursday. So there's a call at 1 and at 8 Eastern Standard Time, and so just make sure you figure out which call would work best for you that you can be on. All right, adios.